Can you begin with your personal story? Like, what's your name? How did you came to?
My religious name is Ho-un Scholastica, and Ho-un is a family name, and so all of the monks here at the monastery would have Ho-un, H-O-U-N, as their first name, and then Scholastica is the name that Master Ju gave me when she ordained me, and the religious meaning of it is woman of contemplation. When you combine that with Ho-un Scholastica, it means woman of contemplation under the Dharma cloud.
What is contemplation?
Contemplation.
What is contemplation?
To be able to sit quietly and to think about things from your heart rather than your brain. So if I've had a argument with somebody, I can sit contemplatively with that and just allow the thoughts to come up and not go through this, I was right and she was wrong, or she was, etc. So meditation and contemplation are the major part of our practice, along with keeping the precepts.
Okay, and what is your personal story? How did you came to the Buddhism?
Well, I was living in Seattle. I was working as a registered nurse, and I had meditated years and years and years ago at an ashram in Montreal when I lived on the East Coast, and something about that stuck with me. So here I am, 30 years later, and my child is 19. My only son is 19. I didn't have any financial debts. He was making his own life. And there was something inside that was unresolved. And I had been coming down here as a layperson to meditate and come to retreats. And
how long ago it was?
This would have been 28 years ago, maybe.
And what kind of ashram you've been before?
It was a yoga ashram. Swami Sivananda, I think was his name. And the thing that struck me about it is that there was yoga, and there were Dharma talks, and there was meditation. And there was something there that drew me in. So when I was coming down to the Abbey, I remember one time being here for a retreat and being in the cloister on our walkway and looking down the central garden and just feeling very much at home. But it's difficult to describe. It was like a sense of peace and being where I was supposed to be. So years, 3 or 4 or 5 years later, when, as I say, when my son was grown and I was able to, I decided that this was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, that there was something I wasn't seeing, and that the monastery was a place to resolve that.
And did it resolve that?
Well, I think it has. I think, as I said this morning, I think cleansing our karma is an ongoing process. I can look back at conversations I had with my son, which would have been 50 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, and feel great remorse and great regret. I can't do anything about it now. My son was killed in an automobile accident quite some time ago. But I can understand that anger was the cause of that. And Buddhism believes in rebirth, not reincarnation. And
what's the difference?
Well, I think reincarnation is, and I'm not an expert on this, but certainly in Tibetan Buddhism, but reincarnation is the karma that I have is going to be reborn in a certain person. When we speak of rebirth, we mean that whatever unresolved karma is still here, at the moment of my death is going to go somewhere so that it can get resolved and return to the eternal, return to the Buddha. And, you know, in my own lifetime, I can look and see how things that I learned from my mother and father, I passed on to my son, and now he's passed that on to his grandson. And I think that's a perfect description of how karma works. You know, Reverend Master Jiyu calls karma saddened love, so that everybody has a pure intention, whether you call it Buddha nature or the Godhead or whatever, but that pure intention gets distorted by our fears and desires, by our greed, hate, and delusion, by ourself, the self that we create. You know, I like this and I don't like that, so I'm going to go this way and not go that way.
We have a argue about karma on another table. So I was asking, is enlightenment seen as a final goal in the Buddhism or in Zen Buddhism?
I think enlightenment is our everyday life, and I think that enlightenment is always there, and that what enlightenment means to me are those little moments when I can recognize, oh, I'm acting out of greed, I'm acting out of anger, I'm acting out of delusion. So I think enlightenment is an ongoing process. And I've never had any great enlightenment experiences. So somebody else might tell you something differently.
What about nirvana?
Well,
the difference?
You know, there's Theravadan Buddhism and there's Mahayana Buddhism. And for us, as Mahayana Buddhists, nirvana and samsara are the same thing. And samsara is looked at, this is the world we live in, the world of greed, hate, and delusion. And nirvana is recognizing that it's our attachment to our greed, hate, and delusion that is causing suffering. And so when we recognize that, then this very life is nirvana. And there are people that see nirvana as they do enlightenment as a goal. I don't see it as a goal. I see it as being able to live life clearly in the moment and be able to understand the cause and the consequence of what's happening.
And we still didn't understand. As I understand, one of Noble Truths says that it's possible to stop suffering. Right? You agree?
Right.
So I understand this point of enlightenment, or this is a point of final destination in Buddhism. Right?
I might not think that way.
Okay, how do you think?
Well, because I think you have to look at not just the first noble truth, which is that suffering.
But this is not first. It's
which
probably
is
third or
suffering
even
exists.
fourth. Yeah.
You know, and the second the second noble truth is that suffering is caused by attachment, and that there is a way to end suffering, and the way to end suffering is through the Noble Eightfold Path. And I think you can't. And so, you know, the Buddha has been translated as saying, I only teach two things: suffering exists and the end of suffering. And the end of suffering is something you have to work on every single moment of your life. You have to be willing to give up the attachment to what we like and dislike.
But if I'm working on end of suffering, I'm suffering right in this moment when I'm trying to work on that, isn't it?
Well, then we just recognize
So I will never reach the final end of suffering, and if I'm working and working and working on that.
I think if you're attached to reaching the end of suffering, then you won't get there.
No, I'm not about. This is not about attachment. This is about the worldview.
Right.
So, if from your point of view there is no final destination or state of consciousness where there is no suffering, this path is not go somewhere. There is no path.
Well, I think the path is what you tread every day. And if what you want is to be comfortable, then the Buddhist path is probably not for you, because it's not a comfortable undertaking. It's looking deeply within ourselves, because we're the source of our suffering. Suffering isn't out there. When I was a nurse, and I would have 2 patients with exactly the same diagnosis and with exactly the same pain, as exactly as one can get between 2 individuals. One person was in agony, and the other person said, "This is what's happening. This is what's happening to me." And the difference between the 2 was amazing to me.
See, we are in a moment now, we were thinking about going to the top of the Shasta.
Okay.
But we are not in a really good physical state. So
Right.
we are in a kind of hesitating about that.
Right.
And we're also thinking about that on a kind of spiritual challenge, kind of that. So, like, if we really get to the top, or at least go for the top, it will also help us in our spiritual journey. And using this metaphor, I see that there is a top, at least in the physical world,
Right.
and there is a path to the top. And so I might not reach the goal, the top, for example, because of my physical state, or
Right.
I can die on the way, but at least I was walking to the top. But what are you describing? That there is no top state. And in this case, it looks like it doesn't matter where you go. So if we would not go to the Shasta, it's the same as if we go somewhere else. Will you respond to that?
Well, I don't know that you can compare the 2, but when the Buddha says there is an end to suffering, the end to suffering is letting go of our attachments. And if I were fortunate enough in this lifetime to cleanse all of the karma that I've inherited, then there wouldn't be any karma to pass on to anyone. And one could think of, I had reached the summit, if you wish to think of it that way.
So after that, I'm free from karma. I became free from karma law.
Maybe, hypothetically.
Yeah, this is the idea, is that on this stage I'm free from karma.
Yeah.
And our question was in the previous talk also, if I get to this point, can I be free from all your precepts?
No, because you're only free. Only free if you have cleansed all your karma. You're free of karma right now. But when you take the next breath and the next step,
but I'm on the stage.
if you don't keep the precepts.
But I get the quality inside of becoming free from karma simultaneously.
Right.
All the time. So I perceive the world in a way I'm free. I continue to be free. This is a stage, as I understand, of Enlightenment Summit, top.
At that moment.
Okay.
But the next moment.
I have a quality inside. I live in a way that I'm not collecting the karma.
Well, then you're an enlightened being.
Okay. And in this case, can I be free from your precepts?
No.
Why?
No. Because the precepts are what maintains enlightenment. I mean, if we are enlightened...
Until you didn't get it. But after that, what is maintaining enlightenment already inside.
It replaces kind
Yeah,
of
what
rules.
for some rules
Formal
from
rules.
outside, if I am even quicker than all the rules.
Because you're human.
Ну и что? But I'm not regular human. I'm enlightened human.
Yes, but you're only enlightened in this moment.